All right, mine is on the National Airspace System, and I am Paul Keith. So first off, this is Task K. So first off, what is it? It's a systematic classification that's used to keep everything safe, efficient, and organized in the skies. Without it, you end up running into issues like it can make you a statistic. That's why, on average, 32 planes per year crash by VFR and IMC, and some people say that 50% of accidents, of all aviation accidents, are caused by weather. What it does, it can help you, as long as you follow the rules, you can avoid becoming one of these statistics. And that leads us to, what are the different kinds of airspace? You have controlled and uncontrolled. Those are the main different kinds. Controlled airspace is Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo airspace. Uncontrolled is Gulf. The main difference is that air traffic control has authority to do what they want in controlled airspace, and then they don't really have authority in Gulf. That does not mean that you can go into Gulf and do whatever you want. You still have weather minimums. You still have to keep in mind that there are rules. You don't get to do whatever you want wherever you go. So, Class Alpha, IFR only. You will never go into your VFR. And it starts at 18,000 feet MSL, goes all the way up to flight level 600. Since it's IFR only, the plane has to be instrument equipped and pilot has to be instrument rated. As well as once you're above 10,000 feet, you need to have mode C and it needs to be out equipment, transponder, and you have to have a operable two-way radio. It's not depicted on the sectional because it's everywhere, basically in the 48 contiguous United States. And for more information on it, 14 CFR 91-135. Next biggest one is Bravo. These are your biggest airports in the United States, like your Denver, Charlotte, Atlanta, and they are, you can kind of think about them as an upside down birthday cake. They have at least 3 layers usually. They go from the surface all the way up to 10,000 feet MSL. That's that outer layer. The outer layer will go usually from about, it'll have specified dimensions on the sectional, but there's usually at least 3 layers with it. The visibility requirements and cloud clearances, 3 statute miles and clear clouds. The pilot requirements, a lot of them, they will not let student pilots fly through, so you have to have at least that sport pilot, recreational pilot, private pilot license in order to fly through it. The airplane requirements, you need to have, within the 30-mile VL, you have to have mode C and ADSB out equipment, as well as a two-way radio, because in order to enter the Class Bravo, you have to be cleared into the airspace, and the only way you can do that is over radios. And as you can see, it's depicted on the sectional. You see it right here by these solid blue lines. You go all the way around it. You can also see, kind of see this mode C VL. It's kind of marked by a very thin magenta line. Another thing to note is that Class Bravo, all Class Bravos have a control tower. Next, that brings us to Charlies. These are your next biggest airports in the United States. They are marked by these solid magenta lines. They're kind of like an upside down birthday cake, except there's only 2 layers. So there's less layers to it. The visibility and cloud clearance requirements, there's 3 statute miles, 1,000 feet above the clouds, 500 feet below, 2,000 feet horizontal distance. To enter this, or in order to enter, you need to have a mode C and ADSB out transponder, as well as a 2-way radio communications, because you need to establish 2-way radio contact before you can enter the Charlie, which is usually done through approach control. And for any more information, there's 14 CFR 91-130. And Charlies are also only control towers. Next, that brings us to deltas, which is what we have here at Eastman. This is depicted by this dashed blue line, always controlled, or always have a tower. The visibility and cloud clearances, 3 statute miles, 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 horizontal. In order to enter, you have to have a two-way radio, because in order to enter, just like the Charlie, you need to establish two-way communications. It is under 14 CFR 91-129. And they usually go up to 2,500 feet AGL. So which is what's marked right here. Eastman it's kind of weird. Theirs is a little bit different, but normally they'll be 2,500 feet AGL, which means field elevation plus 2,500 feet. Next, it brings us to class Echo. So Echo is most of what we'll be flying through training. Basically, if you look at this space right here, you can imagine it starts at 1,200 AGL, and then when you get, these are magenta vignettes, these kind of shaded magenta areas. This shows that within this area, all the way up to this dash line, that it is class Echo down to 700 feet. So it's between 18,000 to 700 feet right here, between 18,000 feet and 1,200 feet in this area. And then that brings you to this dashed magenta line, which shows us Echo airports. This means that it brings the Echo all the way down to the surface. So it's and in this area, it's from the surface all the way up to 18,000 feet MSO. So the weather minimums, below 10,000 feet MSO, it's 3 statute miles, 1,000 feet above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. And then once you're above 10,000 MSO, you will need 5 statute miles visibility, 1,000 above, 1,000 below, and 1 statute mile horizontal. There is no radio required for entry, so it is technically controlled airspace, but you don't necessarily have to be talking to somebody while you're in it. And sometimes they have towers at these Echo airports, but it's kind of rare. And then Mode C and ASB out is required when you're operating above 10,000 feet MSO. Next is Class Gulf. So Class Gulf is not usually depicted on the sectional. You can kind of picture, this is a Gulf airport. So you see it doesn't have this magenta vignette, which means that the Gulf starts at 1,200 feet. So this airport is in Gulf, which is different than that last one because it had that magenta dash line. This is also a Gulf airport, except the Echo starts at 700 feet above it, whereas here it's 1,200 feet since you have that magenta vignette. Gulf and here is kind of weird. So this is kind of an extenuating circumstance. They have these kind of shaded blue areas, which show you that the Gulf actually goes up to 14,500 feet MSO. Not something you see very much. It's usually only in the mountains. It's normally from the surface to 1,200 feet AGL. For more information on it, 14 CFR 91-126. So the weather minimums for Class Gulf, there's kind of more to it than some of the other airspaces. So as long as if you're below 1,200 feet AGL during the day, it's 1 statute mile clear clouds. Above 1,200 during the day is 1 statute mile, 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. And then below, or either you're below 1,200 or above it at night is going to be 3 statute miles, 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. And then if you're above 10,000 MSO, regardless of these other circumstances, it's going to be 5 statute miles, 1,000 above, 1,000 below, and 1 statute mile horizontal. So this is what I use. This is what I recommend as a memory aid. It's very helpful when it comes to the check ride. If the DP wants to ask you what are the weather minimums for this airspace, it's really good to kind of write this down and have that repetition, so you can kind of just spit it out whenever you need to. The more you write it, eventually you can have this kind of as like a picture in your head, and it's always kind of been useful to me. As you can see, Bravo 3 clear clouds, Charlie and Delta 3 152, Gulf, and then you got below 1,200 1 clear clouds, above 1,200 1 15152. Then Echo and Golf at night is 3152. Echo or Golf above 10,000 MSL is 5111. Alpha, IFR only, and Echo above flight levels 600. So that brings us to some weird airspaces referred to as special use airspaces. So it can be extenuating circumstances as to why you might want something other than just your Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Golf. Sometimes you have things that like national security reasons, or maybe they have to keep the president safe, or military areas where they want to keep some of that general aviation traffic away from some of these fast-moving jets. So that's why they have a lot of these. So going into our first one, these are prohibited areas. So you don't see these very often, but under no circumstances can you fly through them. Intersectional, they're kind of by these jagged blue lines, kind of. That's what they're depicted by. You can see these along the Georgia coast. We actually have one, and they are marked by a P with a number next to it. You can see right here, P-50. And they're usually for security or national welfare. So like, maybe, I know they have one off the coast of Georgia that I believe is like a submarine thing or something like that. Basically you're never allowed to fly through it. That's what you need to remember. Then we have restricted areas, which are a step below prohibited areas. They're marked by, as you can see right here, an R and then a number by it. So you can see that it's kind of similar to that prohibited area where it's got the blue jagged lines that kind of circle it. And these lines, you'll know you can tell where it is because they point to it. So it's it doesn't point away, it points into it. It's a helpful way to know what it looks like on a sectional. You can only fly through it, VFR or IFR, you can only fly through it if you get ATC approval, which will only happen if it's not active. So, for example, if I'm just flying around, I'm not talking to ATC at all, then I cannot fly through this. If I'm getting flight following or something like that, I want to cross country, I say, hey, can I fly? Maybe I'm flying from point A to point B, and so instead of flying all the way around it, I want to fly through it. I can say, hey, can I fly through restricted area 5306 Alpha? And they can say, no, it's active, or yes, it's not active, you can fly through it. It's usually for artillery firing, aerial gunnery, or guided missiles, things that you don't want to accidentally get caught up with. If you do fly through it inadvertently, you could get intercepted by fighter jets. Next, that brings us to warning areas. Warning areas are typically found off the coast. They're basically, for all intents and purposes, the same thing as restricted areas. They just give them a different name. So they are denoted by this W and then dash the number. And like I said, they're usually off the coast. They also have these blue jagged lines that kind of circle them. Yeah, they're basically meant to warn aircraft of danger, just like those restricted areas. They don't want you to fly through them without talking to somebody, basically, and end up in a sticky situation. So they start from 3 nautical miles off the coast, and then outwards. That's where you can normally find them. And that brings us to military operations areas, or MOAs. These are, you can kind of think of them as another step down. They also include military activity. They are used for a lot of military training. You can kind of see on the sectional, it's got these magenta jagged lines, that's how it shows them. And when they are depicted on the chart, they don't use numbers. So these ones are a little bit different. It says the Bulldog, Alpha and Bravo, MOA. So they give it the name and then MOA at the end. And VFR, you can fly through it. You don't have to talk to anybody. Sometimes when you're IFR though, they won't let you fly through it if it's active. For VFR, you need to be very careful. You need to be very attentive when you're flying through these areas because there could be fast-moving objects up there alert areas. Alert areas is where there could be high volumes of pilot training or another type of unusual activity. They are marked by this A and then the numbers alpha 293. And you can see that they also use these magenta jagged lines to kind of circle it. Anybody can fly through it, but it's kind of like same principle as the military operations areas. You need to be highly attentive because they're, like I said, high volumes of pilot training. So there could be a lot of people doing maneuvers and things like that. So there could be somebody coming below you, shondilling up into you, or any kind of thing. Somebody coming down into you. So you got to be kind of always watching, being careful where you are, where other people could be. Next, this brings us to controlled firing areas. These are not on your sectional. They basically take care of this on the ground. If they see you coming, they will stop firing, they'll let you pass, whatever the case may be. And it usually contains activities that are hazardous to aircraft. Spotter knows. So that's basically basics of controlled firing areas. Not something that you necessarily have to worry about as much as a restricted area. And this one is our air defense identification zone. So it circles the entire United States. As you can kind of see it right here. It's this long line comes through here with contiguous U.S. It is. So this kind of has like a line and then like dots. So it's kind of like a dotted magenta line with a solid magenta line. And it's used for national security. You have to be on an IFR flight plan or a defense VFR flight plan in order to enter it, because they obviously don't want you entering the airspace if you're, a terrorist or something like that. So the requirements to fly through, you need a two-way radio because you need to be talking to air traffic control when you enter in, and then you need a mode C transponder, altitude encoding transponder. And lastly, this brings us to TFRs, temporary flight restrictions. These can pop up anywhere. They are not on your sectional, so you got to be kind of careful. This is kind of why it's very important to look at these before you fly. They're a type of NOTAM, which is a notice to airmen. And it's not marked on the chart, but if you have an application like ForeFlight, or you use a website like 1-800 Weather Brief, things like this when you're pre-flighting, you can normally see it by this red line. This is a good example because Disney World always has a TFR, but they're used typically for areas of public interest, public figures like the president, any space agency operations. So like if there's a space launch, they'll usually close off a very broad area. And then protection from incident on the surface, maybe if there's a volcano erupting, things like that. Or if there's areas of high public interest, this means that there's they would expect a lot of general aviation traffic to come and kind of want to look at it. And when you're doing that, you're kind of creating a lot of hazards for these general aviation aircraft. So instead, they just kind of say, no, nobody can come here. And that is it.